this is also the 21st century. If you do not have a picture ID with you, how do you function in the world? I mean, you have to be, what, 18 years old to vote. And the fact that they say it could hurt, what, 500,000 voters in Pennsylvania that won't be able to vote? Why? Because they don't have a picture ID? I mean, I can't get into my gym without a driver's license. I mean, this is the world we live in. If you can't produce that, you shouldn't be able to vote, in my mind. You should not be able to vote. Because how do I know if you're even a legal citizen? I have no idea who that is. I mean, as you mentioned, the county in Ohio, more votes than actual registered voters. I mean, this is the United States. We can't figure out a voting system. And when it comes down to politics, the left or the right, both are going to argue when it's in their benefit. As you mentioned, you know, it goes from election to election. They'll argue when it's in their benefit. But I think now, obviously, the left doesn't want this to happen because they think it's going to hurt the minority vote.
And I am so freaking sick and tired of the race card being thrown for this, because just like Matt said, this is the 21st century. You can't get on an airplane, you can't open a bank account, you can't cash a check, you can't get into a gym without a photo ID. So are those things racist because you're required to get have a photo ID to get on an airplane to travel? No. So why does that apply to voting? Voting is one of the most basic fundamental rights in this country. People have shed blood over this. So why not go the extra step and secure the integrity of it instead of playing racial politics?
These are legal terms.
Ridiculous.
But de jure and de facto. Our debate when it comes to race has moved to de facto. De jure means on its face. Is it racist on its face? And the answer to that is obviously no. By requiring the citizenry to show photo ID, that doesn't apply to one race or the other in particular.
Right.
We've moved to this debate over de facto. Does it have a disproportionate impact on one group or the other? And those that oppose photo ID laws say it has a disproportionate impact on minorities because they have a hard time getting what you say is so easy to get, a photo ID.
This raises the issue of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
That's right.
That's really what this is going
about.
to get to the heart of here. Because in Crawford versus Marion County, 2005, it was a 6-3 decision. They said, look, ID is not something that is inherently racist, and there is a sanctity of the voting process here that should be respected. So the Supreme Court's ruled on this. But, Will, what you're laying out here is exactly the heart of the matter, which is that even with that, because of the existing federal statute under Section 5, it doesn't have to be racist. It could just have an effect that has disparate impact on certain communities.
In certain states.
In certain states, you know, going back to, again, civil rights era legislation. So that's really at the heart of a lot of this in Texas. And when you're looking at some of these states, by the way, are covered under Section 5. People don't even know. I mean, it's surprising. And that needs to be revisited here because when they passed the law, the demographics were different. They have since changed. But the Democrats don't even want to talk about it. They just want to keep it the way it is because you can always then have the Department of Justice enforcing things in such a way that it benefits Democrats.
But
and
I think we have to acknowledge that Republicans, they've been up to their shenanigans as well. And we learned about the case in Florida where voters were kicked off the voter rolls who did legitimately have the right to vote. And Republicans are like, oh, we'll have to go back and revisit those cases when they shouldn't have been kicked off the voter rolls in the first place. But I've thought long about this issue, or for a long time rather, that the easiest way to cut through the partisanship of this is for Democrats and Republicans to get together and say, we want to get IDs for these American citizens who are so disenfranchised that they don't have one. It will make your life so much easier in so many ways. You'll be able to get your check cashed. You'll be able to get on a train or an airplane. If you really care about these citizens and their rights and their ability to participate in the American process and the American experience, why don't we all help them get IDs?
Right, and there's been legislation proposed to do that because some of the argument has been, well, people can't afford it. It's a financial burden.
Fine, we'll set up a fund.
That's right. So there has been legislation introduced that says we'll help the states, we'll send some money there, go into these neighborhoods, and into these communities, we'll even help them pay for it to get their IDs, and then what? But the greater question here is, why are there so many people in these specific communities and in these demographics that allegedly don't have access to this?
I can tell you,
that should be, why aren't these Democrat congressmen working on making sure these folks are not disenfranchised and have IDs and are brought into the 21st century?
And I can tell you, it wasn't easy to get an ID here in New York State when I moved here a year ago. You have to have an ID to get an apartment. In order to get an ID, you have to have an address. To get a post office, you have to have an ID. To have an ID, you have to have it. It was just
good
like,
luck trying to
So
get
if you don't have an ID, you're disenfranchised in daily life, by the way.
That's exactly. So I use my passport.
Things.
So why don't we make it easier for American citizens to have this critical piece
these laws on their
of
face attempt to make it as easy as possible for people to vote. votes. They say if you do not have an ID, it does not have to necessarily be a state ID. It can be a driver's license, but we'll create a special, free, by the way, ID for voting. Again, free, reemphasize that. And then if you don't have that, you can still cast a ballot, what they'll call a provisional ballot, and then we'll come back later.
Yeah, but that election is long called after they go
But you do, we'll come back and count.
ballots.
The point is this. It seems to be their concerted efforts to address the problems you're talking about. But you also point out some things like what's going on in Florida that cast a bad light sometimes on some of these seemingly benign measures. So that raises the question, what is the motivation of Republicans? And you have to begin to answer that. And you have to deal with those caveats like kicking those voters off the rolls in Florida.